This is the AM Show. Welcome to our big stories. Now, the Joint Transitional Team is beginning work as early as Wednesday, the 12th of December, as President-elect John Dramani Mahama prepares to take office on the 7th of January 2025. Meanwhile, the incoming president has urged rampaging youth to channel their frustration into the positive enterprise of resetting and rebuilding the nation. This morning, we find out from you, of course. We'll be heading out there to interact with some of you to find out what your expectations are. But in the studio as well, we have his spokesperson, his spokeswoman, Joyce Mogtari. And you can tell from her mood that she's very excited. Good morning, Joyce.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
And good morning to Sweetie Abochi as well.
Come on. Yes, good morning, Ben.
I'm looking at the spectacles, the Westwood spectacles and the white and... Sweetie, would you like to start this? Let's do the analysis.
You know, the last time we had a conversation, or it was on women power politics, and you were so confident that the Ghanaian people would do this, that now that they've done it. How does it feel? Also congratulating you, female spokesperson for the campaign team, and our very first vice presidential woman elected to be vice president of this country. But let's start with how you're feeling this morning.
You know, I'm feeling very humbled. And I think it's taken me quite a while for everything to actually make sense to me. And as one of those who started to serve Mr. Mahama long before we even considered the notion of him actually standing again, I look back on all the years and I can only give thanks to the good Lord, you know. I believe you heard him yesterday, and I think when he actually spoke about the fact that it was a very humbling experience and that he thanks the good Lord for setting him up a meal, even in the presence of his enemies. And you know, this is a verse that all of us grew up on. I mean,
it's the way he paused in between, and everyone
exactly,
continued in their minds.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think it sums it up, you know. I think it hasn't been an easy journey. It's been fraught with a lot of difficulties and challenges. And I believe that he started right from 2012 when he won that other election in the unfortunate aftermath of the demise of Professor John Fifi Evans Mills whilst in office. You know, he had actually served on the unexpired term of Professor Mills' presidency and then gone on even to win the 2012 election. But I'm sure, as history will have it, all of us know what happened then. He was held to ransom for 9 months, and the legitimacy of that particular win was literally challenged and undermined from the get-go. And so for him to go on his own strength, to contest in 2020, take Ghana to its very first hung parliament, was within itself historic.
Right.
But to go on, to win subsequently, and take a commanding lead in a hotly contested election, this is something that I believe has probably never happened before, at least not since the inception of the 1992 Constitution.
Right.
And look, Sweetie and Ben, I think that I feel this enormous responsibility, that this is not something that has come merely as a gift to John Mahama or the NDC, but that Ghanaians have actually spoken out in a way that none of us even anticipated, that this whole 56.7% win is actually, 56.7 is actually...
Well, officially for now, 56.55.
Good. It's actually,
unless we add the
yes, it's actually like, I would say, basically, you know, everything after 50.1 is a gift from God. You know, it's almost as if God wanted to rearrange everything. And Ghanaians have actually passed a vote of no confidence in the New Patriotic Party and President Akufo-Addo. And that is how I see it.
Okay.
Quick thought. Did you expect a margin like this? Almost 1.7 million votes. And counting, because we still have the 9 constituencies.
You know, I heard that our opponents, as soon as they got to the 1.7 million mark, they abandoned their coalition because they knew that there really was nothing else they could do. But let me be very honest with you, that even for us on the night, I remember, you know, we had a large screen in front of us. It was a video that went viral, and we had Mr. Mahama walk into the room with us, and everybody was wondering. And then there was a side where you had the final result, and then there's also the individual results on the other side. And then he kept asking, is this figure going to change? And to be honest with you, all night long, the figure didn't change until the EC chairperson declared him winner with more than the largest number of the votes. And, you know, a very historic win. You know, let me tell you something. We deserve this win, Ben, and make no mistake. I don't want anybody to try to water down what has happened, because historic as it may be, unprecedented as it may be, it is also a repudiation of the impunity, of the arrogance, of the disrespect, and the failure of the Bawumia administration. You know, look, there is something that actually used to irk me a lot, that people sometimes forget even, that the 4 years of John Mahama vis-a-vis what has happened over the last 8 years, you can't even compare, and that is a reality. Because even though President Akufo-Addo had this singular opportunity given to him by the good people of Ghana, I think that he took it for granted. He got too comfortable too early. He refused any form of advice or support. He even refused to listen to people and listen to a democratically elected president talking about his predecessor, a one-term president, refusing to hand over to someone I've beaten, and how we should leave him with Dumso and we should allow the Dumso and failures to stay with him, and how the economy will bounce back. But he knows, you know, listen, we left behind 126 E-blocks at different stages of completion. President Akufo-Addo didn't complete them. He even told the chief in the Volta region that they didn't vote for him. He told the chief in Wenchi that they didn't vote for him. He told the chief in Passat that they didn't vote for him. He told the chief in the Western region that they didn't vote for him. He took it out on everybody who stood up towards him and told them in no uncertain terms that he was not going to countenance any form of criticism or voices of dissent. I think that Ghanaian voters have come of age, that look at what has happened in Parliament. It also tells you that the acrimony of the hung Parliament was also something that Ghanaians found dissatisfactory,
right,
to say the least.
So, just on the back of what you've said, I like the way you're going because it also points to the goodwill you now have. If Akufo-Addo got a margin of 800,000 the first time, it was goodwill. Yeah. By the second time, it had been whittled down to about 500,000.
It was less than even that.
Still goodwill. Yeah. Now, if you add 800 to 500, you get 1.3 million. Yeah. Your win is more than that. It means the goodwill of the people, whether on the back of what performance they felt Mahama could bring, because I've said that he's no saint, but he says he's learned from his lessons. It also comes with a burden of responsibility, madam. You've won 13 out of 16 regions. Even in the 3 regions that were won,
we still have representation.
The Savannah region, the gap was about 30 or so thousand. Yeah. In the Eastern region, for the first time, I was shocked. Yeah. In the Ashanti region, almost 700,000 votes. That puts on your shoulders a responsibility like I don't feel maybe since Nkrumah has been placed on any government's shoulders. Are you ready?
Beyond ready. Beyond ready. Because in terms of experience, I believe that nobody comes to the table with more experience than John Mahama. With the level of interaction, with the level of composure, with the level of respect that Mr. Mahama has for the good people of Ghana, I am confident that people bought into 2 things. That this is a man that we need to lead us into the next phase. Secondly, sometimes there's something we forget. I think, and this is a very personal perspective, that Mr. Mahama's own sense of modesty is something that has played a very key role in this election. What is the biggest thing that actually bothers Ghanaians at this time? Is the ill health of the economy. So when people see a man whose own life example pretends a man who is compassionate, who is sensitive to the plight of everybody, who appreciates what it is. Look, these very interesting interventions that Mr. Mahama has made in the course of even the campaigning period, in the course of his time in opposition, the contributions that he's made to our society in many diverse ways. And sometimes, because most of them are not, you know, not all the spotlights were on him all the time. There were even times when, because some people interpreted these things to mean that they were self-serving, maybe they didn't receive the needed attention. Remember in the course of COVID, for example, when Mr. Mahama convincingly told all of us that Ghana was already at a crossroads, even before the pandemic. And remember when he said that the economy was actually already at the ICU. But most people didn't pay attention. The reason was simple, that as a former president, remember that he would get information that you and I will probably never get. And issues to do with the Bank of Ghana in particular, and matters to do with printing of monies without due process was already evident. But still, people didn't want to believe it. Remember the charade of the OSP and the office of OSP and the things that President Akufo-Addo said at the time. Make no mistake, better a man who is sincere about his own feelings than a man who refuses to take responsibility even when the failings are pointed out to him. I think this is what we have, and this is why Mr. Mahama over the years has gained enormous credibility. My brother, take the matters of investigations, for example. Look at the sort of acrimony that accompanied these conversations, because it was not born out of any genuine intention. It was born out of a destroying an image of someone that you deemed as a threat. And so they took it so personal. And invariably, while they spent, so look at Bawumia's campaign, for example. I keep coming back to that point. What did Dr. Bawumia say to you or anybody listening to him that made any sense? I mean, digitalization is not an event. It's a process. It takes a long time to develop. It takes a long time to build up.
Right.
But he tried in every breath. It was always about John Mahama and why we should leave him as a former president. You see, sometimes be careful what you wish for.
Careful what you wish for. I'll be going to Sweetie shortly, but just know that you see how friendly it is today, and we're giving you a warm embrace.
No, you guys have always given me a warm embrace.
Abana yede boy inchino.
Oh.
And no one yede
Me
bobo.
say,
So always keep that
Ben,
in your mind.
You see, let me tell you something
mind.
that I will refuse to accept on this occasion only.
Keep that in mind.
You see, I don't want anybody to try to take away the fact that JM suffered enormously in the hands of propagandists, that he was also maligned in ways that we ought not to have tolerated. I also think that, yes, I agree with you, that he wasn't necessarily perfection personified. But there's one thing that we all agree with, that John Mahama is a decent individual. And that with the right support, John Mahama will deliver on his promises to you. With the right support, John Mahama will not talk down to you or disrespect you. You know, look, I say something about our leaders. A touch of humility is always helpful. A little bit of candor is also helpful. Taking responsibility. You see, I think sometimes Mahama takes too much responsibility. And I hope that that is something he will work on as an individual. That he should split the responsibility or employ people to do it. And if they don't, find someone else who will take it.
Sweetie, permit me to do this. Just because you've touched on humility, I think it was a class act by the vice president to concede the way he did. Timely, both of you knew where this was going. And by doing that, he made the tensions simmer down to a certain point, even though the EC had not come through. I saw Sami Jemfi's post. When he did that, I had a lot more respect for him for taking that up. How do you feel about that right before Sweetie comes in?
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, when you take such a walloping, better you don't prolong it. And I think in the face of such humiliation, because it was a complete annihilation, a complete disaster of an outing, I think he really had no options. And on this occasion, what was he trying to do? Whatever little credibility he had left had to be salvaged very quickly for his own personal good. And I think that's what he was doing. You know, look, how did we all...
But it is still an act worthy of recognition.
You heard Mr. Mahama, and I was there when Mr. Mahama took the phone call. Indeed, when the call came through, it was my phone that the call came to, asking for which number to speak to Mr. Mahama on, because the vice president wanted to address the press at 9 a.m. And in his speech, Mr. Mahama graciously admitted that Dr. Bawumia had shown statesmanship. You go into battle, you go into a game, you lose miserably. The earlier you actually concede, the better, especially knowing the conduct of the campaign and the things he himself said that, of course, suddenly appeared not to make sense to anybody.
Right.
Right. You said the Ghanaian voter has come of age. There was a time that the now president-elect John Dramani Mahama was celebrated as a young leader in this country. Now he's not so young anymore. And the new entrants, we have seen a lot of young people who have just won parliamentary seats. You can talk about Edem Agbana, Eli Klimakrugu, even Baba Sadiq and the rest. I would wager you, although I do not know for sure the fact or the figures in terms of the demographics of who voted, out of that over 60% of people, I would wager you that a huge number of those voters are young people. How youthful should we expect this government to be?
Well, I think Mr. Mahama has spoken at length about the fact that you have a very great mix of very youthful people. You could see even from our campaign, for example, that the campaign was largely powered by many young people. And indeed, you know, there's one thing about the NDC. I mean, look at our General Secretary, for example. Look at our National Communications Officer, for example. Look at our youth organizer and our organizers. You know what I mean? They're relatively middle-level kinds of people. And so when you look at the level of the persons coming into Parliament, it speaks volumes. And you know, let me make no mistake, and Ben said it beautifully, the National Democratic Congress has enormous broad-based appeal. And I remember this song even from when I was a child, and my father's home was a hotbed for a flurry of political activity, broad-based the best. It was one of the songs for one of the then very active political parties at the time, UNC, I think. So what it actually tells me is that a broad-based political party like the NDC has come to stay. The margin of this victory is also an event that tells us that people have enormous expectations. I also believe that when you look around the world now, young people have actually started to play very key roles. Same will happen in Ghana because we are all part of this committee of nations. And so look at the averages in terms of age. I also have one thing that I say to the young people, and every young person working closely will tell you, I've always told them, be sure that when we repose this confidence in you, that you do not let the side down.
Right.
Remember what happened with the YEA when Akufo-Addo, or in the course of the presidency of Mr. Akufo-Addo, when the young person who was put there decided to take all the resources for their personal use. No investigation came out of it. The subsequent one went to contest on a seat, and we saw how much money was expended. So we don't want young people who will come into office just because of personal self-aggrandizement.
Right.
There is a raison d'etre for this level of confidence in the NDC. And largely, the number of youth encouraging other youth played a huge role and was probably a critical motivational factor.
Right.
And talking about age, I think that age is a number depending on where you sit. But also we must, look, unemployment rates are probably higher than what we know. In terms of people who have gotten multidimensionally poorer, there's more women and young people than adults. And then when you look at the level of pensioners, that age bracket may be 70 and above in Ghana. It's not, you know, our life expectancy is also quite not very, very good relatively. So I think that you look at the economy of skills. Sweetie, you are yourself a very young person. So I would expect that all of you will work very hard to keep this government on its toes.
Let's stay on young people for a bit. We saw lots of young people maybe misinterpreting what the NDC meant by being vigilant, putting their lives on the line, preventing military personnel from entering polling stations. We saw young people pour out on the streets. What is your diagnosis of why we saw pockets of violence or obstruction at the various polling stations? Also because we had seen messages from the camp of the NDC asking or entreating people to be vigilant, move to the collation centers, be vigilant, go out there, turn on your body camera. Now we now know that they weren't in fact actual body cameras. But what's your diagnosis of why we experienced that?
No, let me be very, very honest and emphatic that we don't expect any violence. And I'm sure that Sami Jemfi has spoken, our national chairman has spoken, our general secretary and many other leading members within the party. I would like to actually join them to say that we expect everybody to remain calm. On the other hand, sweetie, this was an election that we were actually the underdogs. We had all experienced what happened in Ayawaso West Wagon, for example, which was historically a very violent election or by-election. We saw what happened in Asinor, for example, which was likewise on a similar scale. Why do you think our chairman, the Honorable Asidun Ketia, insisted at some point that we would only commit to the peace pact if we had the IGP, the Chief Justice, and all these other key governance agencies being a part of the process? You know, look, for months, they told us they had a two-region agenda. So what was the two-region agenda? To be sure that just the Eastern region and the Ashanti region could keep them in power. Then they came down to say, look, we have a plan, a very good plan to win this election at all costs. We had their youth organizer very, very aggressively. And people who swore that if we lost this election, they would give their lives just as a way. Look, we talk about rigged elections, okay? The ballot stuffing, the overvoting, the pink sheets that people don't sign, and all of these discrepancies that happen, the fraud, that is one thing. The other thing is the attempts to suppress the choice of the voter.
Is that why we saw those
Why
incidents?
not incidents. Why those instructions went out about vigilance? If you notice, in the last week of our campaign, we told everybody to be vigilant. For the first time, we had trained a large retinue of polling agents. All of us went for this training. And let me tell you, former appointees, the lawyers within the party, the professionals group, various categories of persons, too many to mention. We had a large retinue deployed across the 16 regions of Ghana. And when you see the result today, what does it tell you?
But are you concerned that because of that, that rhetoric of being vigilant, that is why we saw the
that may be, that's what I'm saying, it may be a huge contributory factor. But ask yourself, the 500,000 pre-printed ballot papers, where did they come from?
Yeah.
So the vigilance delivered that.
Joyce.
They attempt to take some of the seats over, like for example, Domiko Abenya, you can tell the vigilance worked. Look at what happened with Baba Siddiq, for example. The vigilance worked. Look, I know that there have been some excesses in some places. I also admit that our leaders have actually appealed for calm. And when we speak about a body calm, it just says, I was at Adenta, for example, towards the end of polls, for example. The place was very dark, not even very well lit. So the idea was that people could come in with their touchlights. But fortunately, they brought in these two very huge generators and then saved the day. So look, we live in a country where these things happen. My brother, I think that the assurances we needed going into that day of election ought to have come from President Akufo-Addo and Dr. Mahama.
Point made. Just briefly on the point of vigilance, I think we need to move the conversation forward. You say some of these things have happened before, and indeed they have. This is not the first time we are seeing such incidents of rampaging and looting, at least to some minuscule level. But the point is, these actions are criminal.
That is the second side.
No, hold for me. Looting and other things, they are not what we want to see on the back of any electoral win. My proposal, and I shared it in the course of the news review, that we like talking about peace pacts. We should also put in there that the political parties, whether the National Peace Council or some other entity, when you are signing, you also sign off that if you win, regardless of who wins, you start telling your supporters not to be overzealous, overexcited, and engage in these activities. In fact, my proposal is that, you see how both of you, especially the NDC and the MPP, you invested heavily in media ads, even right here on this platform. My proposal to you is that you also invest in ads that communicate to your supporters that if we win, don't do this, don't do that. What do you think? I think that is one of the ways we can use to, because you focus so much on the message and the campaign, but these things we know happen, especially after every 8-year cycle.
Ben, you see, I don't want to necessarily, I told you, nothing will dampen our momentous win on this occasion.
But this has been a little blot on the win.
Don't worry, no, I disagree with you entirely. And remember that we've had a lot worse under President Akufo-Addo and Bawumia.
See, but this
let
is,
me finish.
This is the
No, let me finish. Let me finish. You guys want to try and change the narrative. I would disagree with you entirely. I think that, you see, sometimes it is why Akufo-Addo has failed as he has. Let's speak truth to power. State categorically that a lot of the violence that has been occasioned over the years were actually spearheaded by the New Patriotic Party. Look, we were
underdogs. Does it justify this?
Wait, let me finish. You know, I know how to answer questions. If you're my teacher, you will agree with me. The second part is that we are evolving. And certainly, we saw people snatching toilets. Have you forgotten? We saw what happened to Nanka Bruce in Jubilee House, in the compound the seat of government. You saw people removed from their vehicles. Look,
we saw what happened to a police officer
at the... I have tried very hard.
All of
yes, but let me tell you, Mr. Mahama, as an individual, and you and I know, is a man who is enormously geared towards peace. And I know that these things are happening because our boys saw what happened in the past. But let me tell you that this party will make sure that the unnecessary things, like, for example, what happened in Tamale, for example, was condemned. And the Honorable Haruna Iddrisu flew back there. And you saw that calm was restored. Same will happen in Accra. What happened in the case of them going to the NADMO office, for example? Yes, these are things we will control. And for the purposes of the fact that our democracy is evolving, and because it is also such a nascent democracy, look, some of the reasons why people who were not even NDC per se went out there to endorse the candidacy of John Mahama is also because we don't want a repetition of the last 8 years. On that score, I will agree with you. And I will entreat all of our party elders and even our supporters to remain calm. Don't forget that even in most of the cases, Sweetie, there's a lot of provocation too by the persons who have lost. You see, whilst their boss has actually been a very good loser, the people down there, there's still a lot of aggression. You saw what happened in Damango, for example. You know that Mutawakilu has no powers to do something like that. He has no resources to do something like that. He has no apparatus to do something like that. Look, that is a fact. But if people attack you, if people try to take away a legitimate win, like you are trying to take away and using a word like a blot, please, Delta forces were a proper blot. What happened yesterday is something that a lot of our younger people...
I agree with everything you've said.
Yes.
All I am saying is what is good for the goose is good for the gander. And what is wrong, two wrongs don't make a right.
You didn't even beat those ones enough. Now Ghanaians have beaten them for us. So I will not allow you to take this victory.
Okay,
I will still give the victory to the good people of Ghana for making sure that this is a referendum on the failed administration of President Akufo-Addo and his vice president.
Let's make tracks. There are many areas we want to get into.
Before we talk about transition, what do you think the expectation of Ghanaians as we speak of, the incoming government and its administration? Now we have a female vice president in terms of that bid and a former president re-elected. What do you think Ghanaians are really looking forward to from this administration before we talk about how you're transitioning?
Ghanaians would definitely want less corruption. They want better governance. Ghanaians want the constitution amendment process to take place as quickly as possible.
Is that top of your list?
I like the sound of that point.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It ought to be. And I've told you that I want to be a trustee of our success when the annals are being written. And so I hope that this large supreme lead in Parliament will be put to good use. Yeah. Because the unnecessary rancor is gone. My brothers and sisters, the gentleman who told us that he would refuse to sit with the minority, today returns without a caucus from the central region. That is within itself telling. And Mr. Mahama better know that he is on the cusp of making a history in a way that nobody has ever done. That history must not be lost on him. And that history must be something that impacts all of us greatly. This constitution has served us well. But for the experience of the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament, the Right Honourable Alban Bagbin, maybe, who knows? Do you know how this election would have gone if he hadn't stood firm? At this point in time, Ben, the whole level of interest in our democracy is at an all-time low for two reasons. There's very little trust for the judicial system. It is why we didn't take any of our issues with the EC to court, because we knew what would happen. And we saw what happened. So please, I told you that nobody would take this victory away from John Mahama, Nana Jino Pokwajima, or the NDC.
Let's clarify. No one is trying to do that.
You are trying to, because you use the word a blot. That one I would disagree with any day. You know that normally I pick your thoughts on a lot of things. But on this one, I disagree. I think, leave the criticism where it did. After they told you that they were leaving Dumso with the former president, today he's president-elect. And make no mistake, God gave him the results Akufo-Addo got in 2016, gave him the results Akufo-Addo got in 2020, and added extra. And I know that that is very humbling, even for John Dramani Mahama. And he knows the exigency of the day. And I believe that he will do an excellent job, given the responsibility.
Sweetie Abachi took us to Parliament. A lot of our viewers have been asking about the current state of the parliamentary seats, even before I pose my question, because we're looking at about 90 thereabouts for the MPP. some 187, as has been discussed for the NDC. And I hear there are some 3 independent candidates, including Kwame A+, in there. Let's talk about those dynamics, because there are those 9 constituencies that the EC still awaits declarations on. Yeah. From your figures, in the end, how many seats specifically do you have?
What I gather is that we are doing about 185 seats presently, or momentarily.
185, yes, as of now?
As of now, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And
in those 9 constituencies, what's happening?
Well, in those other 9 constituencies, there's a lot of discrepancies, and don't forget that until the results are actually gazetted, you can't even go to court on them. Exactly. Yeah. So for now, I'm sure this impasse will probably continue for a while longer. I believe that Baba Sadiq has been declared the rightful winner. Yes. I've heard that the Honorable Patrick Bawumia says he's going to take it to court, but yes, that will come only after the Gazette has been issued.
That will have to go to the High Court.
Exactly. Actually. In terms of Dom Kwabenya, I believe that the matter is settled. I haven't heard anything from Michael Kwe, but let me tell you something I observed, that everything was done to stem the win by the Honorable Elekpilim Akurubu after all the hard work she had done. Note that this is the one constituency whose Member of Parliament jumped ship for months, was nowhere to be found. And yet people still believe that the MPP deserves to win.
Let me give you some interesting context. I was there on a citizen's microphone, or constituency lens, I think.
Yes.
I was in Dominic.
Were you not surprised?
And they actually did say that, yes, the same for the very first time. I didn't believe it because it's an NPP stronghold. So I think it puts what you're saying in perspective, that the people really wanted
let
change
me tell you
that constituency.
That there was a lot of arrogance on the side of the New Patriotic Party. A lot of disrespect. Their whole attitude. I mean, for crying out aloud, look at what the Honorable Afenyo Markins said about Nana Jane on that platform. Look at the things our Second Lady Samira Bawumia said about John Dramani Mahama. And I believe, Madam Samira, if you genuinely believe in Ghana, you owe John Mahama an apology, an unqualified apology. To insult a man whose contemporary is your father is un-Ghanaian and unknown to our culture. And I will continue to say this until she does the needful. And I'm delighted. And today I bow and thank the good Lord that he has brought them to their knees. That governance is not an easy responsibility.
Right.
And we ought to know that it is not for children either.
Okay.
If you are immature, don't go into government. And when Ghanaians elect you at that age and make you a second lady, you ought to show decorum.
We'll be talking about transition shortly, but you speak for President-elect John Dramani Mahama. There are some schools of thought that Alan Kyerematen and some of the political actors that we've seen who have proven that they have some great policies and, you know, great character that could maybe augur well for this government should not be left out of the new government that you'll be forming. Do you think we'll see that happening when Alan Kyerematen or somebody else from the NPP, if the NDC thinks they qualify in terms of what you are looking for, to form a government?
You know,
also on the back of that, you know, 120 days contracts that we have with Mr. Mahama.
I mean, listen here, okay? I think one of the biggest failings of this current administration is the sheer size of government. You saw the letter circulating that Bank of Ghana had actually issued employment letters to people on excellent. You know, that's what I mean. So I know that there have been many categories that people can serve in. And note that Mr. Mahama is one individual who cuts across genuinely a lot of people. Him and Mr. Alan Kyerematen have been friends, they've been colleagues. I've known occasions when he's even picked his thoughts on a few things. And you know, Alan Kyerematen is very big on employment.
Yes, and industrialization.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so I do know that he has a lot to offer us. And
so will that happen?
Well, even if he's not serving as a formal member of government,
yeah,
why not? I'm sure he'll be happy to help Mr. Mahama to at least reduce the burdens on people. Look, my sister, poverty is real. You know, I've gone the length and breadth of this country at least 4 times since I've been working closely with John Mahama. Yeah. Things are tough. Let's be humble about it. And so whoever can help us deliver on better opportunities for people, I think it's something we must do and do immediately. There's one thing that people are looking for, accountability and transparency. And I believe Mr. Mahama has nothing to lose or gain. He ought to give the people what they deserve and what they are asking for. Yeah. I think that all of us must ensure that these investigations, when they commence, are devoid of the usual, partisanship and rhetoric that has always greeted these sorts of things. It is time for us to reset Agenda Ghana.
Okay.
If we reset Agenda Ghana, build a better and stable economy alone, my sister, everything else that is out and not working will work again. Look, at the bottom of it, in your personal life, in your domestic homes, when you have no money, what happens? Things are tough.
Depressed.
Exactly. You can't do anything. You can't even take your kids to sort of schools you want them to go to.
Right.
You can't afford the basic things that you need. There are some things that we must take very, very quickly. Health, on the back of the economy.
It looks like speed is one of the elements that you're working with.
We must, of necessity, we must not allow the historic nature of this win. We shouldn't lose momentum even like the others did. Okay. And you see, like I say, what are the lessons that all of us can take from what has happened to Akufo-Addo, for example? A lesson in humility. That when people go out there and queue to elect you into office, they demand respect. They deserve accountability and transparency. The worst thing, they don't want you to spend all your time hounding your opponents, as he did. So he lost sight of what was important.
Right. Joyce, I want to run a few things by you very quickly. The first being your parliamentary numbers. Apart from maybe 1992, where, of course, it was a no contest.
And even then, we're only 200.
Exactly. This is like the biggest majority we've seen. In fact, this is, in Parliament, I don't know what to call it. Some have said on social media, I don't want to repeat that. They say this one is not minority. It's something else. I don't want to.
This one, they have no caucus.
They have no caucus.
No caucus.
But this also means, and that was why I was happy when you started talking about constitutional review on the back of the 2010 Constitutional Review Commission's work. This gives you wide powers.
Wide powers, great latitude.
The fear sometimes is that
you might
power. Lord Acton, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
But you see,
how are you going to manage this power?
I'm sure that all of us appreciate that what has happened also deserves a certain modicum of reflection. Look, we don't want to gloat too much. Work the country too hard. So genuinely, I know that all of our members of parliament will be conscious of this. I'm looking forward to who the leader will be. I'm looking forward to who the deputy leaders will be. I'm looking forward to whom the speaker will be. I've looked in the crucible and looked. I can't tell who will be occupying all these positions, but let me be honest with you. People do want to see that the powers in the executive are at least reduced somewhat. People want to see ex gratia go. People want to see a smaller size of government, but one that is also efficient. People want to see a certain fetter on the fiscal space. This reckless borrowing should be a thing of the past. There are some key things that are not so tangible, but that if they are done and done quickly, you will see that they will trickle down and eventually the good people of Ghana will benefit from it. People are very keen on this. Look at the numbers of judges that President Akufo-Addo has appointed all across. Look at the EC, look at the partisan commissioners, for example. And I would want to see us do these things. Look, for the EC in particular, I have a very great idea that we need to advertise for what we are looking for. Have Parliament vet them, that anybody with a history of any level of partisanship ought not to serve as the chair of the Electoral Commission. I think we can start from there. But of course, once we take the whole amendment process into perspective, all these things will come up for discussion. Ghanaians want a bigger chunk of the decision-making beyond the people who sit and represent them in Parliament. That is what this win means.
On the bit of Galamsey, I'm touching on some issues very quickly just to get you. There's LI 2462, which allows mining in forest reserves and all of that. I've seen some commentary, and people want that to go as quickly as possible. What's the plan?
Oh, certainly. And I believe, yes, Mr. Mahama reiterated all those things. That is one. There's the e-levy, there's the COVID levy that we're still paying, there's the betting tax. There's quite a number of all these very nuisance taxes. And I met a businessman in the Ashanti region, and he said, Madam, I produce drinks, and I'm paying 20% tax on them. How will the business survive? The business has indeed collapsed, and so have many other businesses. Mr. Mahama has already put in place a team. There's going to be a huge tax reform. Don't believe the man who told you about the tax amnesty when he doesn't know how he's going to manage the economy, because that is also unrealistic. So an entire revision of the tax regime is key. I want to see a codified tax system like we have with the Companies Act. Let's stop this business of small amendments, too many to count, too many to follow, too many to implement.
Piecemeal.
You know, exactly. Because in the end, you get no results because the basis for government taxation is always about looking for revenue. And the question is that for the first time, we've seen how the revenue has been wasted. Revenue assurance, to assure what? And yet look at the money that's gone down the drain. Look at the numbers of taxes on individuals. Even you talk about wanting to industrialize, to reduce your import bill. But look at the taxes on the persons who are making an effort even. I think that private sector would want to see a tax environment that enables them to operate competitively. And if Mr. Mahama can deliver on that, and he said something in the course of the engagements with the private sector, that he will continue to engage very regularly. So this time there will be a certain consultation process as we go along. So this is what we intend to do. What does the private sector say? This is what we intend to do. How will the private sector respond? Because my brother, if we don't do that and do that very quickly, taxes alone are a reason why people just avoid them. Because at the end of the day, better to pay a consultant in the corner to avoid tax than to go and pay, because once you pay, you have nothing to show for it.
But as you take away these taxes, and I am in full support of some of them, you also leave a revenue gap, right? We can look at the Argentinian example, and there are quite a number of lessons to be learned from what Argentina has done. A complete turnaround. But as you take away these taxes, you left certain buffers that have been sorely depleted, like ESLA. Okay. You have the IPPs, the independent power producers, and the debts, billions owed them. How are you going to address the power situation? A colleague of mine this morning came to work running helter-skelter because she had no power.
You know, look, I think that because we allowed the outgoing government to bastardize that exercise of going for independent power producers, we've actually also forgotten to think about the fact that these are the partners who will deliver on stable power supply. That you cannot power your economy to any level of industrialization without the requisite power supply to do so. But whilst we are talking about not paying them, I have not heard that we've stopped exporting the power for foreign exchange. We are still doing that. But you see, there is also a certain inefficiency in the system. There's too much wastage in the system. My brother, we could afford $58 million on a national cathedral. That doesn't exist. We could afford $11.8 million for preparatory work towards the construction of the Palugu Dam. And that dam alone is one of the reasons why I have enjoyed our performance in the northern, upper east, and in all the northern regions, in comparison to what Dr. Bawumia told us. Because he told a barefaced lie. And yet people bought into it. Where is the $11.8 million? And they told us that it was used for preparatory work. If you and I had $11.8 million, would you use it for preparations? In any case, the land for Palugu was acquired through a legislative instrument years ago and was demarcated for such use. Why would you then be using 11.8 million cedis for preparation? PDS. And recently, Mr. Mahama was at the State Department in the US. Very disappointing news about how PDS failed because of a family feud. These are some of the reasons why we are happy to see the back of this clannish. But that Palugu Dam project, it's an amazing project, regardless of which administration. We budgeted about $1 billion plus dollars for it. Is that something you would take up? Because what it would do, especially for the northern belt and trickling down, would be massive. And it takes the white and black volters also. And when you look at the upper east region, and I keep saying, on all my travels, if you are looking for human capital, that region delivers. And if it's land, they deliver. And they are largely an agrarian community of persons. So imagine that you can give them a regular supply of water. You know, Mr. Mahama is a farmer himself, and he since started working on his father's farms, because that's what he started doing on his retirement. And he knows that if we can provide water, not dugouts, not 1D, 1F, not all those fake highfalutin things that came to nothing, just money-making ventures. My brother, I say one thing. There are a few key things that will immediately take place over the next few weeks. And I'm happy that people know that we are not going to waste time on transition and acrimonious things about who lives where, who moves out of where. Let's focus on the majors and stop majoring on minors.
Let me chip in here at this point. I know that Free Senior High School was a big part of campaigning, both for the NDC and the NPP. So that's one thing that we are looking to see, how the NDC will handle it. But are there any key policies from the outgoing administration that the new government plans to continue or modify?
Well, just because
Let's start from
just
free
because you
SHS.
bring up free SHS. Look, I believe that the commitment was there. Indeed, the Heritage Fund is what has been used so far to fund the implementation. The system is not perfect. There's a lot that is wrong with the system. I will expect that all of you will travel with us as we go along to conduct these audits into just what is wrong with the system, so that we can all build it in a way that it works for all of us as citizens of Ghana.
Okay.
I mean, that project has come to stay. In any case, for those of us from Northern Ghana, we all went through it. I had a Cocoa scholarship for years just because of where I hail from. So it is something that we all can appreciate.
Okay.
And seriously, what is the budget for the implementation? It is the other things, the infrastructure, for example, is a problem. Now that the parent-teacher associations no longer have any say, it's a problem. Now that the placements have become like a government entity that they put under their armpits and dictate who goes where. And also, you see, sadly, it should not have become the political paradigm that it became.
Yeah.
It ought not, especially as the Constitution also enjoins it. And everybody was adamant that at some point this was something that ought to have been done. I think that the over-politicization by Akufo-Addo was also another reason why Ghanaians have kicked them out. Okay. Because at the end of the day, you tell them you're hungry, free SHS. I'm starving, free SHS. I have no job, free SHS. I need water to drink, free SHS. Get Fund was the single largest fund ever set up in Ghana by the NDC and funded most of the infrastructure in the aftermath of Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. And yet, they have actually capped it also. The same with the energy sector leveling. That is why currently we are unable to pay the IPPs. Look, if we can uncap all these things in the next few months, and God has given us a parliament that allows us to take due cognizance of these things that need immediate attention.
But the reason I actually asked the question was not particularly on free SHS, but on the National Health Insurance Scheme. There's a lot of work that this current administration is doing on that front. Every day, Dr. Da Costa Boaje keeps telling us how they're trying to absorb the cost for so many things. Now we can talk about kidney dialysis free for citizens. Is that something you want to review? And I'm using that word carefully.
Let me tell you that all these things about the MPP are just money-making gimmicks.
No, the National Health Insurance
All of it. They have
absorbing the cost of dialysis.
Go to the National Health Insurance Secretariat. See the number of people they've employed. Please visit there from here. Maybe now that the governments have changed it, most of them probably will make their way elsewhere. But please go there. The people who are the beneficiaries, what do they get? Have you checked the salaries of those who work there? Have you checked the incomes, the benefits they get? Look, that is another thing that ought to receive attention. I feel very strongly about government agencies and institutions that feed fat, and the people who are beneficiaries get absolutely nothing. Go to the cocoa-growing areas. Yes!
The people who are beneficiaries of special, I'm focusing on kidney dialysis.
I am serious.
Because that is,
and why do you think kidney dialysis why has it become a challenge? Why is it even topical? Because people go there and don't get health assistance.
Ben, what's the figure that Dr. Da Costa Boaje gave us in terms of how much they're pumping?
I think 200 million.
200 million.
Recently, the latest figure.
Let me tell you that a lot of those monies don't go into what they are meant for.
I'm going to have to ask you to give us
I'm serious. Why? On social media, don't you see the requests every day? People asking for support because they have to go for treatment. And Bawumia even promised that in the next how many weeks, right, dialysis treatment will be free. If they have 200 million and it's all covered, why would they be promising it?
But you could also say for them, while I'm not holding brief for them, you could say that is work in progress because it's actually here in this very studio
you answered even better
that he came the first time and started talking about. In fact, we pushed him and he started talking about, well, more focus going there before these actions.
So what they're doing, what they started doing from the 1st of December, are you saying that that's not actually...
Do you know that we left a blueprint for an entire reform of the National Health Insurance Scheme? Do you know that?
No.
Exactly. So that was always a matter that was on the heart of John Mahama and the NDC. And let me tell you one thing, that our entire health system must change. A few days ago, I was at the UGMC, had an emergency, and I could see how the doctors were completely inundated. There were so many ambulances, very few hands. I tried even to ask them to move the patient into a side ward. And the young doctor came to me and said, look, we have so many patients right now. Even if we move the person, there'll be no doctor to go there and check on them. And because you've come to the emergency, we must keep them all here because that way the two of us who are on duty can pay attention. Hospital administration is a whole area of expertise. It's not just for political talk. The reality is that most of our hospitals are being poorly managed because the persons we've put in charge are not necessarily hospital managers.
Just for clarity, for the sake of those listening to us right now, are you saying that you're going to review or withdraw this policy that, you know, absorbs the cost of dialysis treatments for patients, which only began this year, this month, 1st December?
It is something that even we have in our manifesto, and I'm sure you heard us talk about it. And it was one of the things that came up for discussion because who said we were taking what, we were taking what. We had the same thing even in our manifesto in 2020. And so going even beyond that, why? Something that benefits the good people of Ghana. What would be our interest in
So you keep it? You're keeping
I won't
it.
say. No, I don't want to make, you know, I've told you, I won't let anybody take this win away from us. We earned it. We deserved it. When the criticism was due, you gave it in spades. I think you should allow us to do it our way. Ghanaians have given us an overwhelming mandate so to do.
But the assurance is...
The assurance is that we will do our very best for the good people of Ghana.
Let me run these ideas by you. There are 3 core issues. For the sake of time, let's make it a bit brief. But the first thing, you mentioned a short while ago about ex gratia, and you've spoken about scrapping, you know, taking it off. Of course, you cannot use the law retrospectively. The law must be activated moving forward. What is the plan there when it comes to ex gratia and taking it away? You
know, first and foremost, this is a matter that has actually been on the tables for a very long time. In the course of the constitutional review amendment process, in the course of the stakeholder engagements, every citizen of Ghana agrees that this must change. In any case, at the time when my late father was a member of the Constituent Assembly, how many people in that category of Article 71 officers did we have?
And I think that's something that the Constitution did not foresee. At all. You know, how government has grown and how the tentacles and people... Exactly. I mean...
And it's one of the biggest persuasions for me for why we do need an amendment. And when I spoke to General Sedun Ketia and he educated me on the background to how this particular thing came about, it made a lot of sense. But certainly today, when you have almost 15% of your population being poor, I think it's almost, you know, it's actually unconscionable to have people in a certain category.
So that will be
immediately. And he's told us, even his appointees should not expect any ex gratia. And you see, because of this debate, you notice for the first time in the campaigning period, these matters have not come up as they used to. Because everybody appreciates that, considering where we are today, this is definitely untenable. And I'm sure that it will require some, you know, maybe some level of stakeholder engagement too, because remember that some of the categories, including the chairs of the various constitutional bodies, the judges in a certain category and all of that. So yes, a lot of conversations will go on. But I think that we've gotten to a stage where we can no longer have taxpayers.
I mean, there are people who have enjoyed it for what?
Forever.
Especially members of Parliament, and they've been there
at every
6 terms, 7 terms. It is unconscionable.
It is.
Quickly on continuing projects, legacy projects. What is the plan? For example, let me just put one to you, Agenda 111. I mean, there are so many projects, and one of the biggest losses to the Ghanaian, one of them, is, we're starting and we have so many examples. I don't want to get into those. Moving forward, what is the plan?
Yes, moving forward, I'm sure you've heard Mr. Mahama that there will be an immediate audit of all the abandoned projects, and he's repeated this in each of the 16 regions that we have toured. We must, have a matter of necessity, and I'm hoping that we're going to have some media.
I'm sorry I have to interject. Yes. Sorry. But this audit is usually where the problem starts. No, hold for me. Hold for me. Saglemi started with a so-called audit. Until today, we are where we are. So explain this audit for us properly.
Let me explain to you. We know they are dotted the length and breadth of the country. Just identify them and we complete them. And this time we're not going to spend, because these are already projects that are in the pipeline. What are you waiting for? You know, look, we must end that consistent trajectory. Presidency, administration of Ghana, our foremost chief executives, must remember that infrastructure ought to be a given. Whether you are MPP, you are MDs, like I tell all the time, when you are sick and you go to the hospitals, Who knows where your political affiliation lies?
Yeah.
So if we build on our health
No one
facilities,
sees, no one cares.
No, nobody cares. I mean, the doctor that I met yesterday, I don't even knew who I was. I mean, later on, maybe there was a nurse who knew it was me, but he was very professional. And that is what we should expect. When you get to this point, you know, I'm telling you that if Mr. Mahama were to renege on this particular promise, it will not be an easy thing for people to cope with. We all want to see those projects completed and in real time. And please, I don't want us to compare what we intend to do with what those other ones did.
No, I'm
they
not
told you
asking
they
for
were
any
giving
comparisons.
you one
I'm just saying,
dam.
what is the
they
way
were giving you
forward?
millions per constituency. In the course of the campaign, you didn't even remind them. So I've told you, and I love a certain song that keeps playing back in my mind, but I won't repeat it here. But let me tell you something, make no mistake. Mr. Mahama has got his pulse on this nation with all the attacks, with all the smearing, with everything that has happened. He has stood very firm in one thing, that he loves Ghana and he will deliver on this promise. And I think this mandate gives him that. And you can write it down.
Sweetie Amochi will come in
Yeah.
shortly, but this last bit, there's Operation Recover or Loot. I've heard all kinds of talk about it, oral and all that. I believe we who have voted for you will want the NDC to ensure that anyone, in fact, in the course of this electoral period, as I've engaged people, the last time with Bright Simmons and co, I was talking about the fact that some of those cases, if they have not gone to court, because once they go to court and they are even there, you can appeal. But for example, the Cecilia Adapa issues and the OSP, maybe even as far back as Ejenim Boateng Ejay of the Public Procurement Authority and all of that, we must have proper closure as Ghanaians with those cases. But how are you going to deal with this oral?
We have no options, right? And
Because it also shouldn't be a witch hunt. It must be done in the right way.
As a servant of a man who probably has suffered the most from witch hunts, I'm sure we will not want the same to happen to others. But that should not also take away the fact that we also demand accountability from those who have served in government at any point in time. For those where there are allegations that require a full investigation, of course, they'll be done. Don't forget that we have many of these constitutionally mandated bodies to fight corruption, for example, and there are many of them. There are a whole raft of stories to do with allegations of corruption. And yes, the ones in the pipeline ought to be seen to their likely conclusions. But you see, I'm sure that even as governments have changed, certainly our judiciary itself is probably doing a certain self-introspection and knows very well that Ghanaians will not demand anything less because they will expect that they will deliver on what it is that people want. You know, my brother, we must take the questions about accountability very, very seriously. And as an NDC, I think that one of the largest reasons, someone sent me a very interesting text this morning. One of the reasons why he went out even to vote for the first time was because he heard about this operation, Recover or Loot. You understand? Mr. Mahama said it will cut both ways. And at least, and I heard Franklin Kujo say it on one of your platforms, in the case of the National Service, for example, which is a recent scandal, note that National Service under Mr. Mahama was fully investigated. If you remember, when they even...
I do.
Exactly. So, you know...
Was that not when Pesawai...
Absolutely, was there.
Now
so
Professor...
there was every commitment. You know, look, we work in a human institution, okay? And so certainly sometimes some of these things will happen. But I'm telling you one thing. Many Ghanaians actually went out there in support of us because they want more transparency, more accountability. They want governments to be responsible. And now we know that if you mess up, you would go home. So we will take these talks very seriously.
So the joint transition team begin their work tomorrow.
Yes.
What does that look like? Are there any challenges you've identified? What are the top priorities? Can you paint the picture for us?
Well, you know that
begins tomorrow.
Normally all these things happen and they start off with a phone call with the current occupant of the seat of government. I believe the phone call has come, the conversation has started, and so tomorrow for the second time we'll be accompanying the boss to the seat of government. And I also do know that for the very first time also he'll be going there not just as a person going to hand over but now he will be receiving the handing over notes.
That must be quite a feeling, huh?
I mean, look.
The last time, let me tell you, when in 2016, the former president lost, the look on his face, you could tell. And now going back as a victor, I mean, that would be something,
Do you remember
won't
his
it?
last speech in Parliament?
Yes, yes.
Just to infer, I can't quote verbatim, but he spoke about posterity will judge whether or not he had delivered on his mandate.
That reminds me of something,
now
actually.
he's going to take
Joyce,
the baton back from him.
There was this cartoon, animation. Do you remember?
Yes.
Where there was a bus.
Of course.
And
the bus
former
driver
president was driving.
Yes.
And then you remember that?
Yeah, of course.
I think it was so.
Of course.
It was so prophetic.
Of course.
In a way,
Of
if you think
course.
of it now. You just
And
reminded me of it.
The most ironic part was when Bawumia went and picked up the steering wheel. Did that not actually sound very funny? Because there's Mr. Mahama in the bus and they say move over. And now today he wants to, so he didn't want the bus. He just wanted the steering wheel.
Yeah.
So that should tell you that, this is just how it is. Look, my sister, in all of this, God is not mocked. And God works in the affairs of men. And I know that God has actually worked in a way that we all didn't expect. He has actually put a real spring in Mr. Mahama's steps. And I know that tomorrow when this process starts, it will be focusing largely on what is good for the good people of Ghana. I will say one thing. I pray we don't see the acrimony of people being chased out of their homes. I know young kids who were very traumatized by that. Yeah. And I think that is something we must take and do very carefully. I mean, look at Mr. Mahama that day, that morning. And I would ask Mr. Akufo-Addo this question when I see him, and I hope that tomorrow I'll be there when he comes. That small house, what would it have cost the good people of Ghana to even allow Mr. Mahama to stay there for 6 months? Let's hope that this time JM will show leadership.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Just before you go, I mean, there are some questions for you, but two very quickly.
Okay.
One, what are the main areas the NDC will target in John Mahama's first 100 days as president, including sports? What are the main areas the NDC will target in John Mahama's first 100 days as president? And you could feed in your social contract, your 120-day social contract. That would be my final bit.
This is it. And I think it speaks to resetting Ghana. Jobs, accountability, prosperity. And we actually have summed it up. It will all start first and foremost with resetting the economy, okay? Secondly, we will look at the levels of hardship and know that anything you do must be to ameliorate poverty first and foremost. It must be to improve our financial standing. Secondly, it will be to stabilize our economy. Thirdly, it will be to reduce reckless borrowing. It will be making sure we find the 10 billion big push resources to invest in the private sector, to invest in government, so that we can deliver on the 24-hour economic policy. That will start to ignite the level of jobs that we want to create. We also need to ensure that we build into government efficiency, so that the wastefulness of state resources will also stop. Then, whilst we are in this heated campaign, when they do not even know whether or not they are staying in office, they are still out there procuring vehicles, I don't know for what. So hopefully those buses that came in will be put to full good use by the citizens of Ghana. So hopefully when we are going to the ministries in a few days, the buses will be deployed to carry workers to work.
If you can still find them, that is.
Well, I hope so. And remember that we are going to implement immediately an economic transformation agenda. And this was something that I think Alan Chairman spoke to at length, because remember that in the course of the negotiations to the IMF, for example, after they had sworn that they will never go to the IMF, remember that the IMF said that the homegrown solutions that were left by John Mahama were actually the way to go. I believe that we have a knack of what should be done. And in 120 days, this is Mr. Mahama's social contract. And it starts with the fact that he has a commanding lead in the House of Parliament. And so with that particular lead, a lot of things that require some rules, some regulations, some sort of regulatory or parliamentary approval will be taken very, very seriously.
This is not a question.
So this is it.
It's my parting words for you.
Absolutely.
Young people turned out in their numbers to vote for the NDC. The DDEP has hurt a lot of elderly people as well. Young people, elderly people, the most vulnerable, don't forget them. Unemployment rates are very high and all of that. Let's take care of them.
On a lighter note, I hear Martin Pemu has been tipped as incoming special prosecutor. What do you make of that?
You know, I mean, today I gave a shout out. I salute Martin, you know, one man anti-corruption crusader.
Right.
I think he's a modern day Martin Alamisi Amidu. So I'm sure that he'll be keeping us on our toes.
Yes,
I mean, don't forget,
he will.
Martin doesn't play. You know, he's my
Right.
brother. I've known him for many, many years. I know that he will stand up and defend the cause of the good people of Ghana. And I hope, Martin, that if we err, please draw our attention in whatever category of participation that you're going to be participating in. Otherwise, he's a fantastic lawyer. You know, look, lawyer, they are.
I like how you evaded my actual question, but but that there is Madam Joyce Mogtari. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on your victory. It was beautiful to see.
Hearty congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations to you, and congratulations and salute to the first female vice president of the country, Professor Jane Opoku-Agyeman.
Yes.
We are happy. It's a good day to be a Ghanaian woman in this.
And I love Mr. Mahama's tribute to her.
Yeah.
And to say to her so directly, I think was actually very, very beautiful. And Nana has done a fantastic job, you know. This campaign is not easy. Very soon, I will try very hard to publish my campaign diaries, my sister.
Okay, I'm
it
looking forward to reading
at
it.
All. And so
all right.
She's done a yeoman's job. And the central region delivered beautifully for the NDC. And so the fact that Nana is with us is not lost on us, what the central region has delivered. And so they'll be keeping faith with her, and she will then.
Now that you're mentioning regions, do you have special shouts for the Ashanti region?
Of course.
Okay.
Hey, certainly. Look.
700K, close to 700K.
Absolutely. And you see, know that there are no strongholds now. Life has become very fluid. And with social media, my brother, nothing is lost on the society. Let's remember to respect voters, respect the citizens, give them what they want. You see, look, when you are making an effort, people appreciate it. But just don't give them nothing and then try to tell them that it is there. Maybe you don't want to see it. I think that is what this is also.
City about Ghana for the Okom.
Well, we have to go. Thank you so much. Madam Joyce Mogtari speaks for President-elect Mr. John Dramani Mahama. And thank you so much for joining us, Benjamin Akapo. There's still so much coming your way. But before we go, I want to remind you that this year's CompuGhana Cashback has been named as Prime Cashback Season, and it's packed with incredible deals and exciting surprises. This Prime Cashback, CompuGhana is bringing you exclusive discounts, prime savings, and awesome surprises when you shop products from any of their branches nationwide. You can find products from your favorite brands like Samsung, LG, TCL, HP, Lenovo, Dell, Media, Nasco, Tecno, Infinix, Itel, Huawei, and many more. Visit any of CompuGhana branches nationwide and enjoy exclusive discounts on all products. You know, CompuGhana has a wide range of IT-related products: mobile phones, laptops, printers, desktops, tablets, television sets, fridges, home theaters, air conditioners, gas cookers, and the list goes on and on. But what's more amazing is this year's Prime Cashback with CompuGhana has got great prices with instant gifts and cash for your shopping experience. So when you shop at CompuGhana this season, be on the lookout for the surprise team. Answer a question correctly and win instant cash and gifts. You deserve this opportunity too. So rush to CompuGhana now. The promo runs to the end of December. So visit www.compughana.com or simply call 0302-752-020 for more information. Ben will tell us more and then we'll take a break. Return with more on the AM show. Please stay.